Hello, welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Yuka Etade. Here are the stories making headlines across the continent. COP29 kicks off in Baku as African nations call for more funds to fight the impact of climate change. We'll take a closer look at how the continent is bearing the brunt of global warming. Could a corruption scandal in Mauritania end the country's anti-migration partnership with the European Union? The question now looming over Mauritania after at least 11 police officers and 2 smugglers were accused of accepting bribes from sub-Saharan African migrants in exchange for their release. 2 decades since the French army opened fire on civilians in Ivory Coast, a collective of victims sue the French state. We'll take a look back on one of the bloodiest chapters in Franco-Ivorian relations. The UN's climate change conference, COP29, kicked off in the Azerbaijani capital today. This year's edition is all about money. For the next 2 weeks, negotiators from nations around the world will be gathering to identify new sources of funding to curb global warming. The focus is particularly pertinent for several African nations who are calling for more climate finance from wealthier and more polluting countries. Now, Africa faces a stark reality. The continent contributes less than 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions, yet it continues to bear the brunt of climate change.
No country is immune. So let's dispense with the idea that climate finance is charity. An ambitious new climate finance goal is entirely in the self-interest of every single nation, including the largest and the wealthiest.
Well, let's cross live to Baku now and speak to Mithika Menda, who is the Executive Director of the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. It's great to have you on the program, Mithika. Thank you so much for your time. Now, you're, of course, attending COP29. What can you expect, or can we expect, in terms of discussions on Africa?
Well, thank you very much, and it is a great pleasure speaking to you here from Baku. Yes, here the negotiations have started today. There are a lot of expectations, but as you know, everything is dampened by the U.S. elections, where now the person who pulled the United States from the Paris Agreement in 2016 has returned to the White House. So the mood is not very good. And it is also this has exacerbated what has been there before, the global geopolitical landscape, which is really dominated by the Ukraine Russia war, just within where we are, and of course the Israel-Hamas war. So it is not very good news for climate finance. And here, as we meet here, this is the COP. We are calling it the COP of climate finance, because we are expecting parties to agree on a collective quantified goal on climate finance, where the 2009 goal of $100 billion per year is going to expire in 2025. So we expect another target.
Well, let's talk about that point specifically, because many African nations are calling for the annual financing to go up to what I have here, $1 trillion. That's tenfold the increase of the current pledge. That's for African countries. Do you think that will be able to be achievable? Is that achievable? Will they secure that, do you think?
It must be achievable. What we require is political goodwill, which is seems to be really lacking, and that's the biggest challenge. We are going to soldier on. Of course, this is a multilateral process, which has a lot of interest. And for Africa, we know that money is not a problem. Because that's what the industrialized countries are telling us, that we need money. There is no money, yet we know if there is political goodwill, there is a lot of money flying and going to irrelevant, other irrelevant agenda. So we believe that that is possible. And a lot of studies have been done, and if it is possible, and if the North industrialized countries are committed to this process, then we can deliver what is required in terms of quantum.
And Matika, is more money really the answer here? Is that what is going to actually solve this climate crisis, or does more need to be done? What does Africa need other than money?
We need the industrialized countries to cut their emissions to the acceptable levels based on science and climate justice. Just today, the World Meteorological Organization released its report indicating that we are actually missed the point, and we are missed where we are supposed to be in terms of emission reductions, because industrialized countries have not really deeply cut their emissions. They are continuing with their profligate lifestyles and many other things. So this is the biggest challenge. In Dubai last year, we said that the global community agreed that we need to reduce to abate the production of fossil fuels in place and increase on renewables. That is what we expect. And more importantly, investment in more, and we need more money for adaptation rather than mitigation. So these are very sticky issues which are dominating the negotiations here.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it all plays out. Matika, thank you so much for giving us your thoughts. I really appreciate having you on the programme. That's Matika Mwenda, who is Executive Director of the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's move on. Worries about the state of the environment in Uganda has pushed some to take to the streets in Kampala today. Police there have arrested at least 15 activists for protesting outside Parliament against the construction of the East African crude oil pipeline. Now, opponents to the plan, which will see oil transported from Uganda to Tanzania, say it threatens the environment and the livelihoods of local communities. Our regional correspondent, Clement Di Roma, has more now from Kigali.
15 protesters were arrested and detained this morning in Kampala. The Ugandan organization Students Against COP was protesting the construction of the world's largest heated pipeline between Uganda and Tanzania. They've expressed concerns about the potential impact on biodiversity, displacement of communities, and environmental degradation. For over a year, Chinese companies and the French group Total Energies have been conducting oil drilling operations in northern Uganda, including within a national park. This marks only the beginning of a major oil exploitation project. The key phase involves constructing the 1,400-kilometer pipeline with pipes delivered to Kampala last month. NGOs estimate around 100,000 people will be affected, with thousands already displaced as their land was bought by multinationals. The petitioners further call on the Ugandan government to prioritize renewable energy solutions, such as solar power, in response to the global shift away from fossil fuels.
Next to Mauritania, where a corruption scandal is threatening to put the country's anti-migration partnership with the European Union at risk. At least 11 police officers and 2 smugglers have been accused of accepting bribes from sub-Saharan African migrants in exchange for their release. A major investigation by newspapers Le Monde and El País has revealed allegations of bribery and corruption at the hands of Mauritanian authorities. Our correspondent Caitlin Kelly has more now from Dakar.
Mauritania police officers have been arrested for accepting accepting bribes from migrants and allegedly collaborating with smugglers along the Atlantic migration route. That's according to a big investigation released by European media. Earlier this year, media reported that Mauritania were allegedly using EU funds to detain and abandon sub-Saharan migrants in the desert near the Malian border, often without food and water, and in an area known for jihadist activity. In this incident, the accused police officers instead let people go in exchange for money. The anti-migration head at the police in Mauritania, Commissioner Mohamed Abdel Fattah, was then dismissed 2 days after these arrests. And although Mauritanian officials claim that this was for administrative reasons, reports do suggest that he may have known about what was going on and might have even been involved. This incident and alleged corruption really casts doubt on Mauritania's commitment to EU-backed anti-smuggling efforts in the region. The European Commission told France 24 that although they were aware of the Commissioner's dismissal, that they would not comment on ongoing investigation. In recent years, EU states have redoubled their efforts to curb migration from sub-Saharan Africa via this Atlantic route to Europe. But over the past year, we've seen approximately 34,000 people land on the shores of the Canary Islands, with Mauritania serving as one of the main departure points.
Now, people in Ivory Coast and France are marking 20 years since one of the most bloodiest chapters in contemporary Franco-Ivorian relations. 2 decades ago, the French army opened fire on civilians in the West African nation during protests against the bombing of a French military base in Baku just days earlier. Ivorian authorities estimate that some 90 people died, while Paris says just 20 were killed. Well, today in Ivory Coast, some are still calling for justice, as Tom Canetti explains.
No official commemoration for the anniversary. Only a few members of a collective for victims gathered to lay a wreath and pray in front of Hôtel Ivoire, where protesters were killed. 20 years on, they want to relaunch legal proceedings.
We're bringing a complaint against France for crimes against humanity. We tried to favor the diplomatic route, but unfortunately we've achieved nothing, and the time has come for us to take responsibility and lead the battle for our compensation.
On the 9th of November 2004, tensions reached a boiling point in Abidjan. French soldiers were stationed in front of the Hôtel Ivoire with armed vehicles to protect the 200 French nationals who were staying inside. Facing them, thousands of demonstrators refused to leave, convinced that France wanted to overthrow President Laurent Gbagbo, whose residence was only a few hundred meters away. After a standoff that lasted hours, soldiers fired into the crowd. French authorities acknowledge that there were casualties but haven't disclosed figures. The Victims Collective estimates 57 Ivorians lost their lives and more than 1,000 were injured that day. Claude Soudour was shot, leading him to contract gangrene, and his leg was amputated.
We could hear, "Lie down." And that's when I was shot from the top of the Hôtel Ivoire. I came to defend the cause of my country, and today I find myself with one leg. Every night I feel pain. Every night I relive that situation.
Initially calling it return fire, Paris eventually admitted that it was dissuasion fire, citing that the military forces securing the Hôtel Ivoire had been overwhelmed by the crowd. It was the result of 4 days of escalations. On the 6th of November, 2 Ivorian aircrafts bombed the French military base at Baku, killing 9 French soldiers. Paris retaliated within the hour, destroying the entire Ivorian air fleet. Anger swept through the streets of Abidjan, and some French expats were attacked. Their evacuation was organised as a matter of urgency. Neither Paris nor Abidjan has made any statement commemorating the anniversary of this tragedy.
Well, that's it from all of us on the Eye on Africa team. Thanks so much for your company, and do stay tuned to France 24.
France 24, your window on the world.
Liberté, égalité, actualité. France 24, a different point of view.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.